that's 11 o'clock, so it's time to start the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. The audio for today's webinar is going to be either through PC audio delivered as part of the broadcast or by dial-in conference. The conference codes and the dial-in numbers are on the screen. We have occasionally had problems with the PC audio with dropouts and things, which is why we have the dial-in audio. The dial-in audio will be muted, so if you need to raise questions, please use the question box in the broadcast software. Okay, let's get started. We've got quite a lot to cover off today. Just very quickly, by way of introduction, for our software webinars, if you haven't been on one of our webinars before, we're looking at the operational requirements that particular companies have and then exploring what capabilities there are in software to support those requirements. We illustrate the differences between different pieces of software, and we're doing that, of course, because we're hoping to educate users to help them to make informed choices. Normally we'll be talking about the two main products that we host on the Online 50 platform, which are Sage 50 Accounts and SAP Business One, which we provide under our Ambition Enterprise licensing. Okay, so let's crack on. We're talking about charities. And our first question, if we're talking about charities, is what makes them different? Well, we're going to talk about that, but we also want to consider, why are they the same? They still have double entry bookkeeping. They still talk about credits, debits, assets, liabilities, accruals, prepayments, and everything else that goes with that. They also have pretty much the same financial reports, balance sheet, the profit and loss they tend to call income and expenditure. Some charities get very excited if you use the word profit, but effectively it's the same. Charities do have some specific requirements that you don't have in a commercial business. So they have the SOFA report, which is a template for which they need to report. That's part of FRS 102. The handling of restricted funds is an important legislative difference. Trustees are responsible for making sure restricted funds are handled appropriately. They will have a different relationship with their donors to most commercial organisations, depending obviously on the size of the donor. And tax handling on transactions is different. In general, there is no VAT, of course, in charities, because charities don't make vatable supplies. Some may do, but most don't. But of course, they can be also looking to recover gift aid on their donations that they've received from individuals. So different handling of tax. Also, of course, what's important is not just the operational and legislative differences, but they're culturally very different. Most officers working in charities think about finance differently to people at the equivalent level in commercial organisations. We often hear stories about high-profile, charismatic charity CEOs that don't really engage with their financial responsibilities because they are, I guess, maybe consumed by the passion that they have for the charity's aims and objectives. Charities have a very high dependence on volunteers. I personally think that's, for most charities, one of the biggest challenges they have. If they rely on volunteers, it's the management of those volunteers. And how do you deal with people who think they're doing something good for you and actually are undermining what you're trying to achieve without realising it? It's much easier to do that in a commercial environment than it is in a volunteer environment, because of course you don't want to upset any of the other volunteers by the way you deal with people who are freely giving up their time for the charity. Trustees are normally detached. It's usual that the officers employed in the charity aren't themselves trustees, and all of the trustees are effectively non-executive. I myself am a trustee on two small local charities, and that's certainly the case with the charities that I know about. And of course, decisions that are being made are being shaped by the charity's aims, and according to what the objectives of the charity are, that will often mean that the decisions they make are not the same sort of decisions that a commercial organisation would make, because a commercial organisation will often sit down and look at the commercial realities to make decisions on that basis. And then in addition to that, of course, they have all of the same organisational challenges that a commercial organisation would have. So we're going to press ahead and we're going to think about reporting on information. So when we're talking about information systems, one of the key aspects we need to consider, obviously, is how we get the information that we need out of the system. So ultimately, the information system is capturing transactions. So to report on those, we need to collate those transactions into relevant reports. So that means grouping the right transactions together, and in order to group them together, we need to understand how we've captured the transactions and how they've been coded so that we can then report on them. And that's the key to setting up any information system, is it's understanding how to tag the information that goes in, how to code it, so that we can identify the information that we've captured, which means the reporting of that information then becomes easy. So the first thing we're going to look at is tracking transactions by way of the nominal account. So all transactions will have a credit side and a debit side. There are going to be two nominal accounts which are updated as part of that transaction. This is a very simple but effective way of capturing information. If a nominal account is all you need to get the information that you want out, that's all you have to do. Just get it coded to a nominal account, everything works from there. It does only give you a single dimension of analysis. We're going to be talking more about dimensions of analysis later. So thinking about nominal account tracking, we're going to talk about the SOFA, the Statement of Financial Activities. So this is mandated by FRS 102, part of the Statement of Recommended Practice, the SORP, governing charities. Generally, most charities will only produce this for their annual return. There's no reason, of course, why they couldn't, if they wished to, produce it for interim meetings with trustees, but I'm not aware of charities that do that on a regular basis. It's worth saying that, as with a company producing their statutory accounts, they don't normally produce that from the same system that's producing the management accounts. But it could be produced from suitable data that's obtained from the management accounts, in the same way that your statutory accounts are produced from a trial balance. So we need to capture the information in the management accounts to allow us to produce the statement of financial activities, and the easier that is to do, the happier we will all be when it comes to the end of the year. So coding accounts to meet the statement of financial activities, we are coding up nominal accounts to meet the statement. It's just like coding against a chart of accounts. So in the same way, for a chart of accounts, you would code in the chart of accounts which nominal accounts fit into which parts of that chart of accounts. You can do the same thing for the SOFA. So in Sage 50, there is a specific SOFA report which allows you to code that. In SAP Business One, it uses financial templates. Financial templates are a way of effectively implementing different charts of accounts. So a financial template can be set up to collect the information based on nominal account coding to collate information which we could perhaps use for a SOFA. It's worth saying that if you code in this way, the code is only using the nominal code. It's one-dimensional. That's the only piece of information that's relevant to collect the information into the SOFA. We're just going to have a very quick look now at the SOFA mapping in Sage 50 accounts. Tiffany's going to show that to us now. So if I can manage to press the right buttons to hand over, Tiffany's just going to show that to us now. Over to you, Tiffany.
There are a number of reports available for charities to use in Sage, the SOFA report being one of them. There is an option to assign nominal codes to the SOFA report. And to run the SOFA report, we simply click on Reports, click on Charity Reports, and scroll down to generate the SOFA report.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. We will be seeing how to set up financial templates in SAP Business One in a later part of the webinar. So we're going to press ahead. We're going to think now about restricted funds. So restricted funds, it's a legislative requirement that charity trustees properly manage restricted funds. One of the key things we need to recognise is the restrictions are imposed by the donor. They're not imposed by the trustees or the charity in any way. It is the donor who imposes any restrictions. A charity is, of course, free not to accept donations which have restrictions on them that they feel they can't meet, but that very rarely happens, as you can imagine. So charities must make sure that the funds they receive are used for the purpose specified by the donor. Now, the funds, of course, are used to pay for activities, and the activities of the charity are clearly set up in order to meet the charity's objectives, whatever those might be. And one restricted fund might cover several activities. Charities obviously prefer to receive donations without restrictions that they can spend on whatever they think they need to spend it on. But if a donor gives a gift with a specific restriction on it, the charity is obligated to make sure that they can fulfill that, but that might mean spending it on more than one activity. So let's think about the analysis that we're going to need in terms of capturing the information so that we can make sure we're managing restricted funds properly. We talked earlier about using the nominal account tracking. Nominal accounts are going to give us just a single dimension of analysis, what we spent the money on. For example, office stationery. We probably also want to track the activity that it's for. Why are we spending that money? And the fund that's paying for it. So how are we paying for it, or who has given us the money to pay for it? So in order to do that, that single dimension that we've got by using the nominal account is probably not going to be enough. We're going to need extra dimensions of analysis. So having more information for transactions allows us to say we bought some stationery, that comes from the nominal code, for a particular project or activity of the charity, and we use this particular pot of money. Now, the dimensions that we record against may be orthogonal. They may not be orthogonal. What do we mean by orthogonal? Orthogonal is a mathematical concept which has been borrowed by data scientists, and effectively it means that if you change one dimension, it doesn't affect the others. So if you think of a standard XY graph, moving along the x-axis should not affect your position on the y-axis. So your dimensions in X are completely independent of the dimensions in Y. That means X and Y are orthogonal. So we're going to explain how these different dimensions fit together by an example, and we've got a charity that we've made up. My apologies if there is a real charity that this sounds like. It is made up. We've called it Supporting the Homeless. The charity provides support services, not housing, but supporting service for people who are homeless. It runs food banks in 2 locations. It distributes clothing in 2 locations, and it also operates an advice centre for homeless people to visit and get access to advice about benefits, legal matters, whatever they might need. So the charity itself is funded by various sources. So it applies to grant-making bodies to support it. It does get some public sector funding. I know in the current climate that's becoming more challenging, but there are still public sector finances available. There are philanthropists who give money to support the charity, and they also have a number of individuals who are just giving individually to support the charity. And some of those donations that they get come with strings, so they are restricted funds. So what kind of strings might be attached? Well, it depends on who's giving the money. So a grant-making body might have particular objectives of their own. They may want projects to be to meet certain criteria. Public sector will have their own targets, so again they might have factors that they impose. Philanthropists often are wealthy individuals, and it's in my experience quite common for philanthropists to either do seed funding to get something off the ground, or sometimes to do matched funding. So they would want to see evidence that what they're giving is being matched. And individuals may or may not impose restrictions. If someone's been specifically helped, for example, by the charity, and they used to visit a particular food bank, they may want to give just to the work of that food bank. So we're going to think now about how we set up the system. So in Sage 50 accounts, there's a feature, charity funds, which can be turned on, and we're going to use that for tracking the restricted funds. And we're going to use departments to track the activities. Newer versions of Sage, so it's been in for quite a while, have a project accounting feature which could also be used, but that's not in all levels of the software. Departments is available in every license level, so we're going to be looking at that. In Ambition Enterprise, SAP Business One, we're using a dimension on the nominal ledger for the charitable fund, and another dimension on the nominal ledger for the activities. So we're going to have a look in the software now to see how it's set up, and once again I'm going to hand over to Tiffany. It's all yours.
I'm going to show you how to do a setup for restricted funds for a charity. Let's click on New and enter in the fund name, which is Food Bank. For the fund type, let's choose Restricted, and then we need to enter in the bank accounts information and the bank balance. And once we've done this, I'm just going to press OK to then complete the other steps. I'm now going to enter in the contact name and then press OK. I'm now going to repeat the exact same process for two different restricted funds for clothing and advice. So I'm just filling in the bank account information here, the opening balance, and then I'm going to press OK, enter in the contact name again, and then once I've done all of this, I'm going to press OK again. And we'll repeat the same process for the restricted fund advice. So please just give me one moment whilst I fill out the required fields below, and then once I finish this is how you set up restricted funds in Sage for a charity. And as you can see, this is relatively easy to do. To add a department, click on a number and then enter in the department name, which is Food Bank, Charing Cross, and choose Save. I'm going to do it again for Food Bank, Earls Court, and then press Save, and then for Food Bank, Canary Wharf, and choose Save. The reason I've done it in this way is because it's easier to search for departments when they're in consecutive numbers.
Okay, thanks for that, Tiffany. And now Chris is just going to quickly show us how those dimensions are set up in SAP. Chris.
So to set up the dimensions, we go to Financials, Cost Accounting, and then Dimensions. So in this example, two dimensions have already been set up. So the first dimension is the charity project. So when spending, we'll need to put the charity project on the invoice and tag that. And for dimension 2, when spending money, the fund stream needs to go on the document, and also when a donation's made, the fund stream needs to be tagged.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Chris. Right, we're going to go on and look what happens when we're recording donations. So when we have a donation, what's actually happening? Let's think about the accounting that's happening. So in accounting terms, we've got a credit against a particular revenue account, and we've got a debit against a particular donor. Now that sounds very much like a sales invoice. It needs to be attached to a fund, either general fund or a restricted fund if that's specified. It's worth noting, as I said earlier, that some people in charities really don't like you talking about sales invoices. But that's effectively what we're doing. You may find you can call it a donor debit note or a fund debit note or something like that. But in terms of the accounting, the way the system works, it works the same way as a sales invoice. And then cash that's received is credited to the donor and debited to the bank. So we've got a sales invoice and a receipt from the donor or the customer is how we're going to be treating it in the finance system. So costs that we're recording, supplier invoices that we get in, if we're being invoiced, we need to tag that to the activities they're for. There may of course be more than one activity for a particular item on the invoice, and again we need to make sure those are attached to a fund. So what we're seeing is every time we're entering these transactions, they need to be tagged to a fund and an activity. If a particular line item on an invoice needs to be split, then it either needs to be split on entry or we need to adjust that after it's entered. When we make direct payments from the bank, so this is not a supplier payment, again that payment needs to be tagged to the activity that it's for and it needs to be attached to a fund. So we're going to have a look at the process of entering transactions. So we've got Sage 50, the donation being received, a supplier invoice and direct bank payment. So Tiffany will show us that, and then Chris will go straight ahead and show us entering transactions in SAP. So guys, it's over to you.
To record a donation in Sage, we click on the donations icon at the top here, choose the customer, enter the date followed by the reference. As the donation is for clothing, we need to choose the correct fund and department. Then enter the details, which is clothing and CC for Charing Cross, followed by the donation amount. Now that the donation has been posted, under transactions we will now be able to see that a sales invoice and the sales receipt has been posted.
Now I'm going to go through recording a donation for a charity. So I go to sales and then AR invoice. Select a customer. Here I've set up donor as a generic donor. In the GL account you need to select the revenue account, so I'm going to put this against donations unrestricted. So because it's unrestricted it won't have a project, so I'm just going to put the fund stream and I'm going to select the teaching trust and then select update, and then I can select the VAT code, which would be exempt, and this is a donation for £50, and then in the bottom left I select add and then click yes.
Now I'm going to show you how to record transactions against a department and fund. Let's do a supplier invoice. I'm just going to enter in the line information. When selecting a department, I'm going to create a filter where it makes it easier to find the departments by the numbers. And I'm choosing Food Bank Charing Cross. Food Bank for the fund as well, and then the amount for the invoice. And I'm going to do the same below for another item, and a useful tip is you can press F6 to copy the line above information. And once everything has been entered in, just choose Save to complete the invoice. Now I'm going to show you how to pay this supplier invoice. Let's click on Supplier Payments, choose the supplier name Lisa Young, and the invoice line below appears. I want to pay this invoice in full, so I'm just going to click on the Pay in Full button, and then I can press Save and Close.
First of all, I'm going to record a purchase. So I'm going to go to Purchasing, AP Invoice, select my supplier, Paperco, enter posting date, select the general ledger account the expense is against, going to put car hire, and then here we select the distribution rules. So I'm going to put what charity project it was for, Mia Teaching, and the fund stream, the Teaching Trust fund stream. Put the VAT code and the total amount, and then select Add. So that's recorded a purchase.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We're going to crack on. Time's getting away from us. Okay, we're thinking about allocating overheads. So clearly the charity has overheads, and normally you'd have an activity for your central administration function, central admin costs, and of course to allocate overheads you need to do that as you would normally by use of a journal, and the journal needs to transfer from one activity, the central admin activity, to the activity that it's being allocated to. It may well need to change the fund. The nominal account may well not change. Of course it could change depending on what you're doing, but typically you've got a salary cost, you're apportioning that, it's still a salary cost. The thing that goes without saying is, of course, you must have a robust audit trail, particularly for any journals that are going to involve moving a transaction between funds. You can't move from a restricted fund to a non-restricted fund, otherwise the trustees are not fulfilling their obligations. So we're just going to think a moment about the restricted funds, and not all donations that you receive are going to be restricted, and if they are restricted, the nature of those restrictions are going to be more or less restrictive depending on what people have said. So as an example, for our charity here, we may receive a donation that is only to be used for food bank activities. There may be a donation that's only for a food bank in a particular location. There may be another donation that's only for procuring food. So it doesn't mean necessarily buying it. That could mean people going to pick it up. It could mean people phoning, outlets, restaurant outlets, retail outlets, asking for donations of food. That's still procuring food. It could be only to pay for fresh produce. The kind of thing a farmers cooperative might do is make a donation, say we want you to buy fresh produce, not necessarily from the cooperative, of course. So you'll see the way we've laid these out, the less restrictive funds at the top could all be used to also do what the more restrictive fund below that is doing. So clearly, in terms of managing the funds, we want to use up the most restrictive first because they're the most difficult, in a sense, for us to spend. If you are having to transfer transactions between funds or activities, you need to make sure that you're not falling foul of making a donation less restrictive by transferring it into a fund. That leads us into how we report back to stakeholders. Well, there's going to be various stakeholders involved in the charities, and they're going to need various reports. So what are they going to need? Some of those are going to be to do with the effectiveness of programs, which almost certainly go beyond the scope of the financial system. They're going to have various criteria that is going to be set by the stakeholder. And of course, there's also financial reporting. Now, that may only be internally, but increasingly donors are wanting to see how the donations they've given are being spent, how the activities that they're supporting are being funded, not just by them but by others. So you need to be able to do financial reporting by activity or by fund, and of course it's very important for the trustees to be able to confirm that the use of restricted funds is only on the projects for which it has been allocated to or specified for by the donor. In addition to those reporting, almost certainly you're going to want to report versus a budget scenario. So a budget scenario is where you're saying this is how we expect expenditure to happen. And in order to do that, you need to understand how do you budget. So do you budget just by the nominal code? Do you budget by fund? Do you budget by activity? And probably most charities would budget by activities. They may do a budget by fund if they're involved with a particular donor who is requiring that, and then they want to report back against that fund. As funds are spent on activities, if you have a matching of fund to activity, then clearly it is going to be the same thing. So that's how the charity wants to budget, but how does the software record the budget? So in Sage 50 accounts, the budget is recorded against nominal codes only. In SAP Business One, you can record budgets and you can allocate budgets with a combination of nominal code, also dimensions that are in use, and projects is what they're called in SAP Business One. It's a bit like the department tag in Sage 50. It's slightly different, but it's quite similar in concept. So that would enable you in Business One, if you're using dimensions as we have been in this example, or projects to do your activity or fund tracking, then you can actually set up budgets against those using Business One. We talked earlier about dimensions, and the thing to point out when we're talking about reporting is that we're not going to have funds and activities being independent, because of the very fact that restricted funds can only be spent on certain activities, so they can't vary independently. Well, that means we need to be able to track use of a fund. We need to know which activities that fund has been used for, and ideally we need to be able to enforce a restriction. We need to recognise that nominal codes don't hold all the information we need. Now, I'm just very briefly going to refer back to the SOFA report that we spoke about right at the beginning. The SOFA report, if we set that up against nominal codes, the nominal codes need to capture the information for the SOFA report. Now, although we could make sure we can capture everything by using different nominal codes, we need to recognise that as soon as we start putting funds and activities on items other than nominal codes, there is a chance that our nominal codes won't hold all the information that we need. So certainly not for stakeholder reporting. We could set up the system so that nominal codes do capture everything we need for SOFA information, but obviously we need to be careful that we are making sure we're setting it up like that. So how are we reporting fund use? Well, fundamentally we're doing transactional analysis. We're looking at the pairing of fund and activity tags on the transactions. We almost certainly are going to want to report on a particular fund and the activities associated with that. And we're almost certainly also going to want to report on an activity and all funds that are associated with that. So the general rule with any information system, we're capturing structured data into the back end. If we can capture the data, we can show it. But if we haven't captured it, we can't show it. Unless we're capturing that information, we're not going to be able to show it. So if we need to be able to show how a fund has been spent across all activities, we need to be able to capture that information. So how do we do that in software? Well, Sage 50 has a number of reports. What we've done in this example, there's a standard charity fund report. We've actually modified that to include the department information, which we've used to record the activities, and that's giving us a breakdown of all of the transactions lodged against the charity fund by nominal code with department tags. So we're going to have a look at that in a moment. In Ambition Enterprise, SAP Business One, we license it as Ambition Enterprise. We have set up a system internally to collate all of the information against a financial template layout, and that then presents a summary on screen. So because it's presenting a summary and because it's operating in the database back end, it's suitable for much higher transaction volumes than the report in Sage. The report in Sage is listing every transaction, which is great if you need to go through it in terms of an audit trail. But if you've got a large number of transactions, that is going to become unworkable quite quickly, and you will need to think about a different way of doing it. We're going to have a look at those reports now. We've got the modified charity fund report in Sage, and we're also going to look at how the stakeholder reporting based on fund and activities is done in SAP Business One. So I'm going to hand back over to the guys, and Tiffany, you're up first.
There is another very useful report for charities called Fund Analysis Report, which shows all transactions that have been posted to a fund, which is very useful to keep track of what the funds have been spent on.
First of all, I'm going to show you an example of a report that's been created and explain how it can be flexible according to your requirements. First of all, I'm going to go to Tools, Queries, Query Manager. Then I'm going to go to General and then double click Fund Report. So here we need to enter the parameters for our stakeholder report. Here we select the budget, which is the teaching budget. I want to select the fund, which is the F-Teachers Trust. I need to select the project I want to look at. Here I want to select the month which I want to be this month in the report, which is the 4th month of 2017. And here I need to select the financial template which the report is based upon, which I will explain later. So I'm going to select Teaching Fund, and then I click OK to run the report. So I'm just going to drag this over. So here we can see we've got 4 columns. So we've got the budget per month, the budget year to date, the actual this month, and the actual amount spent year to date. So you can't see it here, but these are split into header sections and general ledger codes. So for example, these figures here that are showing, other is the header amount. So these are the subtotals of the general ledger codes that are beneath it, such as materials purchased, which is why they're the same. So I'm going to show you the financial template that this is based upon to help explain where the information is coming from. So I'm going to go to Menu, Financials, and then Financial Report Templates. Here I select Trial Balance, and I'm going to select the Teaching Fund, which is one of the parameters that we selected. So here you can see the structure of the report. So we've got professional fees, project staff, other, and cost recovery as the different headers. So if we look at the top, we can see professional fees, and then underneath there we've got different general ledger codes, and then we've got project staff again as the next header. So if I double click on here, we can see these are the general ledger codes that are assigned to the professional fees section of the report. And we can also create different templates according to what requirements we need. So for example here there's another one called Social Mobility Fund, which has a lot more headers and different general ledger codes associated with it. One more point to remember is the fund report can be exported to Excel by clicking here, and then you can manipulate the data or edit it according to your needs.
Okay, thanks for that. The SAP report there is just being shown, as I think Chris mentioned, in the query window. Of course, once we can get the data, we can present it in all sorts of ways, including, as Chris mentioned, Excel, on-screen dashboards, etc. We're just going to think for a moment about imposing restrictions. Remember, we said ideally we want to restrict things if we can. Remember, we're using standard accounting systems, and in those standard accounting systems the various dimensions that we're using are designed to be orthogonal. So typically, as they're set up in the way we're using them, there is no correlation between the two. Now, it is possible to do other things in terms of setup which is beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. In Sage 50 accounts, it's not possible to modify the way the system works to make sure that we have a combination of fund and department that is validated when the user enters it. So we need to have a way of identifying reports, using reports to identify transactions that are not correct so that we can go in and correct them if we need to. With SAP Business One, because of the database we've got at the back end, remember we use SAP HANA, which is a very advanced in-memory database for our SAP Business One deployment. We're able to implement restrictions within the database in terms of the way it works. And so Chris is going to show us what happens if we try to post a combination that isn't authorized, and how to use the system as we've set it up to authorize a combination of postings so that those will go through. Chris.
In this example, I'm going to create a purchase for stationery against a teaching restricted fund. So first of all, I need to go to the menu. I go to purchasing, and I'm going to create an AP invoice. At the top, I'm going to select my supplier, which is Paperco. I need to select the posting date, which is the date the document will be entered into the system. And I'm going to select the general ledger account. So I'm going to put this against a stationary general ledger account, which is 607504. And under the distribution rule, we need to select the project this is being purchased for and the restricted fund it's for. So the project is EMEA Teaching, and the restricted fund is the Teaching Trust. I select Update and OK. I need to ensure I have the correct VAT code selected, and I put in the total amount. And then when you're ready to add it, in the bottom left there's the add button. And I select yes. So an error has come up in the bottom left of the screen which says this project is not eligible with this restricted fund. This is because it hasn't been set up in the window, so we'll go through that now. If I go to Tools, User Defined Windows, and then Project Fund Restriction. In this window we allow which restricted fund codes can be posted with which project codes. At the moment none of them are set up, which means none of them can be posted. So I will create one for our AP invoice to go through. So the project code was P0005002. And the fund stream code was FTEATRUS, and then I select Update and OK. And now I'm going to add the AP invoice again. And now the AP invoice has been added.
Okay, thanks very much for showing us that, Chris. We're going to run ahead now and think about gift aid. So with gift aid, charities, they are, provided they're registered with HMRC, can claim back tax paid on donations by individuals who are UK taxpayers. Now, of course, they can't just write to HMRC and ask for the money. They require a process to be followed. There's a data gathering requirement that's got to be included, and that process has been designed in for Sage 50 accounts. So what we're going to do now, fingers crossed that all of this works, is we're going to play a Got a Minute video. These are 60-second videos that we produce on the help desk to help people. We've done one a while ago covering gift aid, so we're going to show the gift aid video if all of the buttons work correctly. Here we go.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the gift aid option in Sage. The gift aid option needs to be enabled first, so to do this I'm going to click on the settings button, enable the option and then choose save. Now the option for gift aid needs to be enabled under the customer record. So we need to choose a default fund, and I'm going to choose clothing, tick the option for gift aid and then enter in a declaration date and choose save. There is a gift aid declaration letter that is sent to the donor to sign. This can be run from choosing this icon here. You can then choose the donor and run the report. You can then either choose to print or email this letter to the donor. And this concludes the gift aid video.
Okay, that worked. I never doubted it for a minute. We're now going to have a look at what we can do for gift aid in Business One. So straight away, over to Chris.
So first of all, I'm going to go and open an AR invoice under Sales. AR invoice. So this is where we would record donations. So I'm going to select the customer, going to select a general donor. I'm going to select the general ledger account it's going to go to. It's going to go to donations unrestricted. And I'm going to put it against the Fund Stream Teaching Trust, and I'll update this. And then here there's a column with gift aid, so I'm going to put yes next to that. It means it's valid for gift aid submission. I'll put it as exempt output, and I'll put this as a donation for £1,000. And then I click add in the bottom left. So now that donation's been added, if I go to Tools, Queries, Query Manager, then I go to General tab, and then here I've created a gift aid report, so I'll double click this to run. And here we've got a list of donations that have been made that are applicable for gift aid, and these can be exported to Excel if we click on this button here, and then these can be uploaded to be submitted for gift aid. We can change the query that takes out this data according to people's different needs, so people might want to run it for a date range or have it grouped by who gave the donation.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. I'm just going to take a moment to summarise what we've said there. So gift aid with SAP Business One, there is no gift aid built into the system. It is sold internationally in 150 countries. So what you tend to find is that quirks for one particular jurisdiction may not be in the system. Sage 50 is clearly a UK product and has excellent support for legislative requirements in the UK. But SAP Business One can easily be modified, as we've just shown there. We can put a gift aid column onto the sales invoice so that when we're recording the donation we can say whether it's suitable for gift aid. We can meet the data gathering requirement. We can add additional fields and tables to the system to collect all the information that we need. We can follow the process. We can create extra entities in the system to support that process if we need to. We could extend the system to support tracking transactions. So one of the requirements may be to identify all transactions which are suitable for gift aid but have not yet been claimed. That's relatively easy to do. We would effectively do that by setting up gift aid as an additional tax environment. We mentioned that charities are generally not processing VAT because they don't make VATable supplies, and even if they do, they wouldn't have a single sales invoice which was both eligible for gift aid and a VATable supply. So by setting up an additional VAT scheme, we can have multiple VAT schemes in the system. We can track the gift aid donations as if they were VAT. We can create a deferred account on the nominal ledger to say this is what we're expecting to receive for gift aid, in the same way we're tracking VAT liability. We can then produce a listing or a summary of all the transactions that we have received that are eligible for gift aid but we've not yet received, in the same way we make a VAT return. So you can see that it's a very powerful and flexible system to meet different requirements. Okay, so we're just going to summarise now. Why use Online 50 for a charity? There's a couple of significant points that are relevant to charities. Clearly, we're offering a fully managed, hosted solution with security-controlled access from anywhere. With the typical environment you have in a charity with external stakeholders, a lot of trustees are external to the business, as we've already said, then having a system that everybody can get access to when they need to is clearly going to be very helpful. Using Online 50, they're operational costs, not CapEx costs. You don't have to invest in the infrastructure. Often that can be easier for charities to fund. It does obviously depend on the charity. It's fully managed. That's important for a charity. Typically they won't have, particularly smaller charities, they won't have people in-house with the skills to manage solutions and platforms for them, and it's a scalable subscription. It goes up and down. We have a range of solutions available. We've shown Sage 50 and SAP Business One, catering for different requirements on the same platform. And we offer charity discounts. So at the moment, charities are eligible for a 20% recurring discount on our charges, and we're very happy to do that to support charities. Okay, so moving on, which solution is best? Obviously that's going to depend on your particular requirements. So let's think about Sage 50. What are the strengths? Well, you can set it up yourself. For lots of charities that's important. If you know the system, lots of people will know Sage. It's relatively straightforward to just set it up and go yourself. There is built-in support for gift aid. What are the weaknesses of Sage 50 accounts? Well, there's limited analysis, limited transaction volumes. It's a fixed solution. So, for example, the budget is always by a nominal ledger. You can't include other dimensions of analysis in the budget. And there are no rules, no validation rules that we can put in the system. Thinking about SAP, the strengths, well, there is a lot more analysis that you can have. It will cope with a lot more transactions. It's adaptable to capture data and processes. We can implement validation rules within the system. The major weakness, you will need help setting it up. We have a fast track implementation designed to get you up and running as quickly as possible for a fixed price, and again that is discounted to charities, but you will need help setting it up. If it isn't set up properly for what you need, you won't get what you need out of the system, and for some people that's not what they're looking for. They want something that they've got internal ownership of the way it's configured. Perhaps another way to summarise it is to think about who are the charities who are using SAP Business One with Online 50. Well, we had a look at some of the charities who've opted for that with us, and there tend to be a number of criteria that shape that. Firstly, if the charity has clear requirements and those requirements are not going to be met by Sage 50, then clearly that is a strong case for taking SAP Business One. We've also seen scenarios where there is a financially sophisticated treasurer, sometimes the chief executive. Their career path has led them in a direction where they are more comfortable with the kind of solution that SAP Business One is than the kind of solution that Sage is. Now, there may only be a single user. We have quite a few single user charities on our platform because it's a scalable cost. It's very achievable for single user systems. Lots of people think of SAP as being, hundreds of users, budgets of millions, and that's not the case at all with SAP Business One. I think the key differentiator between Sage 50 and Business One is people who are using Business One have clearly made a decision to use it. The default position that we're seeing is still Sage 50. You need that robust audit trail that you haven't got in some of the other low-end products. Sage 50 is a strong brand. It's been around a long time. People are comfortable with it. It's the default position. So you don't need to make a decision to run it, whereas you do need to make a decision to run SAP Business One. Sage may well give you everything that you need. There's nothing wrong with the product. It's a great product. There are some limitations to it, as we've explored, but lots and lots of charities use it and use it very effectively. SAP Business One does offer you things that you don't get in Sage 50. So I hope this webinar has been helpful to you as you consider either your own charity, or if you're an advisor, how you might advise other charities. We have gone on quite a long time, longer than we normally do, but as we come to the end of our time, if there are any questions, we'll happily take them now. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look and see if I can see any questions that have come in on the chat box. I can see there are a few here. We're going to run through those. It's not too late to submit questions if you've not put anything in yet, but you can think of something you'd like to ask. What we're going to do is we're going to add the questions that are being asked to the end of the presentation, and then that will be spliced into the video. So when we upload the video, it's going to include all of the questions. First up, do you supply training for both Sage and SAP? Yes, we can do. The fast track setup for SAP includes training aiming to get you started. We can do on-site training for SAP. We've done that for customers where they have a number of users that need to be trained. We've come on site, set up a small classroom in their offices to do that. We wouldn't normally do on-site training for Sage. We would normally offer remote training. We do work with a number of other people who may well be happy to do on-site training, and in particular we've worked with a number of accountants who can give you more than just product training. Sometimes people actually need help understanding the accounting behind what they're doing, and clearly accountants are a better place to do that than we are. So the fast track training is included in the cost of the fast track. The other training would be chargeable. For our own costs, we would discount costs to charities, including training costs. Clearly, if we're using a third party, we'd need to understand what you need and what they might charge. But yes, you can get training. Okay, got another question here. To use a charity comparison of startup costs. Okay, so with charities, our normal end user price for setting up on Sage 50, we charge £250. For a charity, that's £150. That doesn't include any training or experiences that often people don't need that with Sage. With SAP, the fast track implementation is normally £3,000. For Charities, I think that's £2,000. I will check that before we post the video and make sure I've got the right answer on there. And that does include training with all the basics of how to run and operate the system. Okay, I'm a small charity. Would SAP be too much for me to learn and adapt to? It shouldn't be. We have got other small charities on the system, as I mentioned. Our experience with people moving to Business One, it's a more structured environment. If you're comfortable with a more structured environment, then you should have no problem. It will expect that you're running period ends and so on. It still allows you to make postings in the same way that you do with Sage, but it is expecting just to have that little bit more structure because it's designed to go into a bigger environment. If you've got any concerns about particular things, then of course call us and talk through what you need. Perhaps we can set up a demonstration with you to look at that. But we've got lots of people, single user systems, both for charities and commercial businesses who are using it. So you should be able to do it fine, I would have thought. Okay, we've got another question in here. Is there functionality to email the reports direct from SAP like there is with Sage? So yes, there is. I'm just going to let Chris give you a bit more information on that.
So in SAP, we can set up the email to use the SAP emailer, so which means you don't need Outlook on the platform, or you can configure SAP to use the Outlook as well, so you can do it both ways and you can send the report through SAP.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Okay, here's an interesting one. If a fund was restricted, I think they mean the donation was restricted, and the and the donor changes their mind on what the donation is spent on. Is there an easy way to change that? Well, I'm not sure you can. As I said, I'm a trustee of a couple of small charities, and my understanding from the training and support that I've had is that once the restrictions are in place, the trustees can't change that restriction. You could, of course, invite the donor to give you more money with a different restriction on it, but I don't think you can. In terms of how the systems would do it, then, as we talked about allocating transactions, you could enter in a journal, credit it from one, and debit it to another. So, effectively, we talked about the sales invoice representing the donation. Effectively, you'd raise a sales credit note and raise a new sales invoice. So the system could do it. I'm just not sure whether legally you could get away with doing it. Okay, got another question here. We receive donations in different currencies. How would this be dealt with in Sage and SAP? Excellent question. Leads in actually... not that you want to wait this long, leads into our next webinar. 25th of May, we're looking at international operations, and we'll be talking more about currencies there. So both Sage and SAP can receive money in different currencies. So receiving the donation in a different currency isn't necessarily a problem. The issue is what else goes with that. So I would have thought, this is off the top of my head, if you're getting donations in different currencies, either think about go to a museum or a cathedral or something like that. They often have a gift box and people are just putting money in, and the money will be whatever they've got, could be any currency. So you've either got that. That's not going to be restricted because they're just putting money into a box, so there won't be any strings attached. Or you might have overseas donations, and that implies some kind of a corporate donor, maybe EU funding or something like that. And quite often that would come with strings attached, which means there's going to be a reporting requirement. So I think receiving the donation isn't a problem. I think the concern would be if they need you to do reporting, are you going to be able to do that? So, for example, we looked, didn't we, at the activities against funds, can you, if you've got someone who's given you money in euros, can you produce that in euros and make sure that you're confident in those figures? That's going to be relatively easy to do with SAP and relatively a complete nightmare in Sage 50. We can explore that in more detail. We will be talking about multi-currency reporting in our next webinar. So that was, as I say, quite interesting that one came in. So in short, receiving donations in any currency you like, not a problem. Reporting in different currencies, that's a completely different challenge. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming up in the chat box. As I said earlier, we have gone on longer than we normally do, so thank you very much for staying with us. We're going to bring the webinar to a close now. So thank you all for taking part, from Tiffany, Chris and myself. Until next time, goodbye.